They called her crazy, a female mechanic with nothing but rusted tools and a stubborn dream. But when Charlotte Reeves inherited a treehouse hidden deep in the woods from her late grandfather, she uncovered more than just family history. She discovered a concealed, self-sustaining power system worth over $1 million. What began as a spark of childhood wonder turned into a revolutionary idea. Now, the very people who once laughed at her are asking how they can help. This is the story of a female mechanic, a bold treehouse building project, and a hidden secret that just might help save the future. But before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing our global family in the comments. Let's get started. The scent of old motor oil and cedar shavings always reminded Charlotte Reeves of her grandfather. Even now, 3 weeks after his funeral, she found herself drifting back to those summer afternoons in his dusty garage, where he let her hold the wrench even when her hands were too small. Charlotte sat hunched over a cracked kitchen table in a run-down trailer on the edge of Willow Creek, a forgotten little town nestled between tired mountains and rusted-out rail lines. The faucet behind her dripped steadily. The wall heater rattled like it might quit for good, her calloused fingers, stained with brake fluid, wrapped around a chipped mug of cold instant coffee. Scattered across the table were overdue bills, a bright pink eviction notice, and her 9-year-old daughter Ruby's spelling homework half finished, smudged with tiny grease fingerprints. She thought about the last thing her grandfather told her. "You've always seen the world a little different, Charlie. Don't ever let them take that from you." She had laughed then. A woman mechanic in a town like this, they called her everything but capable. Now, with her livelihood crumbling and her daughter watching, the letter came from a lawyer about a treehouse. Charlotte had never been in a lawyer's office before. The last time she'd worn anything close to nice was her grandfather's funeral, and even then, it was a borrowed black blouse with a missing button. Now she sat stiffly in a cracked vinyl chair across from Mr. Ellison, an older gentleman with tired eyes and a voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. He pushed a manila folder across the desk and tapped it gently. "Your grandfather, Henry Reeves, left behind a specific bequest for you and your daughter, Ruby." Charlotte blinked. "My granddad didn't have anything to leave. He barely had money for brake pads." "Mr. Ellison smiled faintly. "Well, that's not entirely true." He opened the folder, revealing a worn map, a strange key carved from wood, and a letter written in her grandfather's neat, deliberate handwriting. Ruby leaned closer, her eyes wide, the tip of her nose barely clearing the desk edge. "Is that a treasure map?" she whispered. "Mr. Ellison chuckled. "In a way, maybe. What he left you is a treehouse. And not just any treehouse, one he built himself, years ago, on a patch of land he once owned just outside the national forest." Charlotte frowned. "Wait, like a real treehouse? I thought that was just a story. Something he made up to entertain Ruby." Mr. Ellison shook his head. "It's very real. And unusual. It sits on a private plot, about 20 acres. The structure and a 20-foot perimeter around it are still yours. The rest was donated to the Forestry Service under very specific conditions." Charlotte stared at the key. It didn't look like any key she'd ever seen. Carved from dark wood, smooth like river stone. It was shaped like a tiny tree branches curling up, roots twisting down the shaft like veins. It was beautiful and oddly heavy. "He made this?" she asked softly. Mr. Ellison nodded. "By hand? He left it for you. And a message." He handed her the envelope. She hesitated, then opened it, her fingers shaking more than she wanted to admit. "Charlie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But the work isn't. You always saw the beauty in things most folks missed. That's why I left it to you, Not the house, not the land. The idea. It's more than boards and nails. You'll understand when you see it. Take Ruby. She'll know what to look for. Granddad. Charlotte folded the letter slowly, pressing it to her chest for just a moment. She didn't believe in signs, or destiny. Life had made sure of that. But something about the way he wrote the idea made a strange kind of warmth rise in her chest. She looked at Ruby, who had taken the key and was turning it over in her hands like it was made of gold. "Can we go?" "Mom," she whispered. "Please." By the next morning, Charlotte had borrowed an old pickup from a friend at the auto shop. They packed sandwiches, a flashlight, bottled water, and one small overnight bag just in case. The directions led them miles out of town, down a narrow gravel road nearly hidden by overgrown brush and blackberry vines. Eventually, the road turned into nothing but 2 tire tracks worn into the forest floor. "Are you sure this is the way?" Charlotte muttered, squinting at the map again. Ruby, sitting shotgun, pointed ahead. "Look, there's a red marker on that tree. That's what the map says." "Right." She was right. Just ahead. A faded ribbon of red cloth fluttered from the branch of an ancient pine. They parked in a small clearing where sunlight spilled like gold onto mossy earth. There was no sign of a structure, no ladder, no stairs, nothing but trees so tall they looked like they held up the sky. Then Ruby gasped. "Mom, look!" It wasn't just a treehouse. It was a cathedral, hidden in the canopy, built into the largest redwood she had ever seen. The structure rose in soft spirals, following the curve of the trunk, multiple levels, connected by what looked like a wooden ramp that curled gently upward. Glass panels shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting leaves and sky like the whole thing had grown from the tree itself. Charlotte stepped forward slowly, in awe. Holy hell. At the base of the trunk, nestled into the roots, was a carved wooden door. No doorknob, no lock, just a circular indentation the size of the key. Ruby looked at her. "Can I do it?" Charlotte handed her the key. Ruby stepped forward, fitted it into the groove, and turned. A soft chime rang out like wind through chimes, and the door swung open with a gentle sigh. Inside, the air was cool and clean. Light filtered through the windows like it had been waiting for them. A control panel made of wood and copper sat glowing softly in the center. Screens blinked to life, showing temperature, solar energy levels, water purity. A small message appeared on the main screen. "Welcome, Charlotte and Ruby. The rest will reveal itself when you're ready." Charlotte stared at the screen, speechless. Her hands trembled. She didn't know what this place was. She didn't know why her grandfather built it. But deep in her bones, she knew one thing. This wasn't a treehouse. It was something much, much more. Charlotte had expected creaking wood, maybe an old sleeping bag, some forgotten tools. What she hadn't expected was technology that looked like it belonged in a science museum. The inside of the treehouse shimmered with quiet energy, everything crafted from wood and metal, yet glowing softly, as if the forest itself powered it. "Mom," Ruby whispered, spinning slowly in the center of the room. It's magic." Charlotte was too stunned to answer. She ran her fingers along a copper-lined wall, then tapped one of the glowing panels. A screen blinked to life, displaying live environmental data: temperature, humidity, solar output, water purity. Another screen showed a 3D map of the surrounding forest, with small glowing nodes labeled Solar Array A, Water Source 3, Greenhouse Module. "What is all this?" She turned around slowly, eyes wide, breath caught in her chest. This wasn't just a fancy treehouse. This was a fully integrated off-grid research facility, They explored the lower level first. Every detail felt intentional, solar-powered lighting. Rainwater collection integrated into the roof. A natural cooling system made from stone and airflow vents. Even the furniture seemed hand-built. Not a single screw or nail out of place. Everything was quiet, efficient, clean. In the center of the room stood a workbench, covered in neatly arranged tools and half-finished blueprints. Ruby pointed to a small, rectangular device. "Is this a battery?" Charlotte picked it up carefully. It was no bigger than a paperback book, with ports on either end and a label that read, "Nanocell generator V4 9.3 kilowatt. Storage, solar adaptive." She blinked. That was more power than her entire trailer could hold. And this was the size of a lunchbox. "Where did he even get this?" she whispered. On the wall nearby, Charlotte spotted a drawer labeled Prototype Index. Inside were dozens of files, each one handwritten by her grandfather, diagrams, component lists, testing notes, and at the bottom an envelope marked "Open when you're ready." That night, they stayed in the treehouse. Charlotte cooked a simple dinner with the supplies they'd brought, using the built-in induction burner powered by the solar bank. Ruby sat cross-legged in the living area, flipping through her grandfather's sketches, whispering "whoa" every few minutes like she'd found treasure. After dinner, Charlotte opened the envelope. "Charlie, if you're reading this, then you've seen what I built. It's not finished. It was never meant to be. It's a beginning. You see, I wasn't trying to build a hideaway. I was building a proof of concept, that people can live off the grid, in harmony with the environment, and thrive. Not just survive, thrive. No oil, no gas, no wasted water, no pollution. All of this was built with local materials, solar tech, and some clever mechanics. You'd appreciate that part. You always did know your way around an engine. You'll find the rest hidden below. The key is in your hands and always has been. Love you, kid. Granddad." Charlotte read the letter twice, then a third time. There was more. It took them an hour to find it. Ruby was the one who noticed a floor panel that sounded different when tapped hollow underneath. Charlotte knelt, tracing the grain of the wood, and discovered a small panel embedded with a carved pattern that matched the tree-shaped key. She fit the key into the panel, turned, and held her breath. The panel clicked, then shifted open, revealing a spiral staircase that descended into the heart of the tree. They stared at it, stunned. "You want to go first?" Charlotte asked. Ruby beamed, obviously. What they found underground made Charlotte's knees buckle. The basement was massive and breathtaking. Walls lined with solar converters, advanced water purification systems, miniature vertical gardens that glowed with soft LED light. One corner of the room held small housing models made from 3D printed material and natural clay. In the center of the space was a glass display table, lit from beneath, showing a digital blueprint of something called Project Hearth, Off-Grid Community Design. It looked like a town powered entirely by renewable energy, designed to purify its own water, grow its own food, and leave no waste behind. A small handwritten note was taped beside the display. Projected build cost 1.1 meters. Projected energy independence, 100% emissions, 0% maintenance, self-sustaining, status ready for prototyping. Charlotte sat down, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a quirky treehouse. It was the blueprint for a revolution. Her grandfather had built a working model of how humans could live with nature, not against it. Clean water, free power, food security, community, and no one knew. No one except her. Back upstairs. As Ruby fell asleep under the soft glow of solar lights, Charlotte sat by the window and looked out into the night. She thought about all the times people laughed at her, all the clients who turned her away because she was a woman in overalls, all the jobs she lost because she dared to be both capable and female in a world that hated the combination. And now, they were sleeping in a $1 million secret built by someone everyone thought was just an old man with too many tools. No one believed in Charlotte. No one believed in Henry Reeves. But tomorrow, when the world saw what they'd left behind, they were going to believe. Morning in the forest didn't sound like her old alarm clock. It sounded like birdsong, wind whispering through redwood branches. The soft hum of solar batteries charging again after a night of quiet work. Charlotte sat on the observation deck with a mug of fresh spring water and a notebook in her lap. The world below was still waking up, but her mind had been racing for hours. She kept turning the same thought over and over again. What if he meant for me to finish it? She looked over at Ruby, still asleep, curled up in a blanket near the indoor garden they'd discovered the night before. A warm beam of sunlight filtered through the window, catching the red in her hair. In that moment, Charlotte realized something so big it made her eyes sting. This wasn't about what her grandfather had left them. It was about why. Back in Willow Creek, she'd always been just the girl with the toolbox. People brought her lawn mowers and old tractors when they broke down. Some were polite, some not. The men at the garage let her work. Sure, but only when they were too lazy to do it themselves. She knew they mocked her behind her back. A woman fixing carburetors, building anything, she was tolerated, but never taken seriously. She remembered overhearing Mr. Branson at the diner laugh with his buddies, saying, "Charlotte Reeves can't build more than a chicken coop without breaking something." She hadn't said anything then. She never did. Just kept her head down, got grease under her nails, and worked harder than anyone else. But now, she was standing inside a structure that made Branson's entire house look like a shed. Her grandfather had believed in her, had trusted her not just to inherit, but to carry on. She hadn't just been fixing machines in that trailer park. She'd been training for something bigger, she just didn't know it. Until now. Later that day, they explored more of the underground lab. Ruby found a drawer labeled Design Field Units, filled with blueprints of small, self-contained devices. Solar cookers that folded flat like paper, a water purifier that ran without electricity, emergency shelters that could be set up in under 30 minutes. Charlotte recognized the parts, all basic materials, stuff you could salvage from junkyards, which meant anyone could build these. Ruby looked up at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Charlotte flipped the blueprint toward her. "This isn't high-end lab stuff, baby. This is accessible. That means he wanted this used by people who didn't have money. He didn't build this for the rich." Ruby nodded slowly, "Like us." Charlotte smiled. "Exactly like us." That afternoon, they found the video logs. In the upstairs loft, what looked like a cozy library space, there was a projector built into the ceiling. Ruby figured out how to turn it on. And suddenly, Henry Reeves's face flickered into the room. It was older than she remembered, grayer. Slower, but the same gentle eyes and the same quiet confidence. "If you're watching this," he began. Then Charlie found the key. Charlotte couldn't breathe. She leaned forward, both hands clutching her knees. "I always knew you'd come out here eventually. I built this for you, for her, for anyone who still believes the world can be better than it is. They'll laugh at you, I know that. They laughed at me, too. But someday, someone's gonna see what's in here and realize it's not crazy. It's possible." He paused, his expression softened. "Charlie, this place isn't finished. I ran out of time. But you haven't." Charlotte wiped her cheek quickly, pretending not to cry as Ruby rested her head on her shoulder. "I never wanted to escape the world," Henry said, voice almost breaking. "I wanted to give it something better, Something that could outlive me, maybe outlive all of us. The screen went black, and in the silence, Charlotte finally heard what had always been buried under the noise of survival. Purpose! That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the tree line, Charlotte stood on the edge of the observation deck, watching light dance on the horizon. "I used to think I didn't matter," she whispered, "that all I'd ever be was the girl with the wrench." Ruby leaned on the railing beside her. "But you matter now," she said quietly. "You're the one who gets to finish it." Charlotte laughed softly, wiping another tear away. "No, sweetheart," she said, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "We're the ones. We're going to finish it together." The next morning, Charlotte woke up with her mind already racing. Not with worry for once, but with possibility. She had spent so much of her life fixing things that were already broken, rusted engines, cracked water heaters, an old trailer that groaned every time the wind blew too hard. But here, in this hidden marvel her grandfather had built, she wasn't fixing anything. She was building. Ruby padded into the kitchen barefoot, hair a mess, wearing one of her mom's flannel shirts like a dress. "You're up early," Charlotte said, pouring filtered spring water into the kettle. "I couldn't sleep," Ruby said with a small smile. "Too many ideas." Charlotte chuckled. "Me too." After breakfast, they returned to the underground lab. Charlotte spread out blueprints on the glass table while Ruby carefully unpacked the scale model of the Sustainable Community Project hearth. Every miniature house in the model was marked with solar panels, rainwater collectors, and tiny rooftop gardens. Charlotte stared at it like it was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. What if this was real? Not just a dream, not just a prototype hidden in the forest. What if people families like theirs could live in homes that didn't poison the planet, didn't rely on corporations for power or water or food? She whispered the thought out loud. Someone has to build the first one. In the filing cabinet labeled Implementation Strategy, Charlotte found what she didn't realize she was looking for. A detailed plan sketched in her grandfather's tight, blocky handwriting for how to bring Project Hearth to life. There were sections titled Community Outreach, Material Sourcing Low-Cost Regions, Open Source Licensing, Volunteer Training Models. Her grandfather hadn't just been a genius engineer. He'd been a visionary, someone who wanted to make these solutions accessible, not just impressive. And at the bottom of one folder was a single typed sentence that sent a jolt straight to Charlotte's heart. "This belongs to the people who need it most." Later that day, they hiked to the edge of the property where a clearing opened up to a wide overlook. From there, Charlotte could see the tiny specks of rooftops back in Willow Creek, the trailer park, the rusted-out gas station, the town that had laughed at her for being a female mechanic with too much ambition. She stood there for a long time, the wind brushing against her cheeks like a soft reminder. You don't have to ask for permission anymore. Back at the treehouse, Ruby had drawn a picture and taped it to the wall, a community made of tiny homes with solar panels, surrounded by trees and smiling stick figures. She had written in big, clumsy letters at the top, "Let's build Grandpa's dream." Charlotte sat down next to her, took her hand, and squeezed it. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it!" By the end of the week, Charlotte had made her first phone call. She remembered a woman named Dr. Elena Marsh, a sustainability professor who had visited her high school 10 years ago to talk about off-grid housing. Charlotte had been the only student who asked her a question, the only one who stayed behind to talk. She had written down her email address on the back of a napkin. To Charlotte's surprise, it still worked. They set up a video call. On the screen, Dr. Marsh appeared older now, with silver at her temples and reading glasses pushed up on her head. "Charlotte Reeves," she said, her voice filled with curiosity. "Haven't heard that name in a long time." "I found something," Charlotte said, "and I think it's important." She explained everything, The treehouse, the underground lab, the models, the data, the dream. She didn't hold anything back. When she was finished, there was a long silence. "Doctor," Marsh finally leaned in and said, "You understand what you're sitting on, right?" Charlotte nodded. "I do now." "Doctor," Marsh smiled. "Then let's help you protect it and build it." The next few days blurred together. Dr. Marsh connected Charlotte with a nonprofit architecture firm in Oregon that specialized in sustainable community design. They offered to help translate her grandfather's models into modern blueprints. A tech group out of Seattle heard about it and offered pro bono assistance with patent defense. And a small team of environmental engineers, all women, volunteered to visit the site and assess how close the lab's inventions were to real-world implementation. Charlotte stood on the deck of the treehouse one afternoon, watching them arrive, a group of brilliant minds, excited, determined, full of questions. And they were all looking at her like she was the one who started it. It was terrifying and beautiful. That night, as she tucked Ruby into the built-in bed beneath the treehouse window, the little girl looked up at her and said, "Do you think people will believe us now?" Charlotte paused, then smiled. "They won't just believe us, baby. They'll want to join us." By the third week, Charlotte barely recognized herself anymore. Not because she had changed clothes, she still wore the same work boots, oil-stained jeans, and that faded red bandana Ruby insisted was her inventor's crown. No, it was something deeper. She'd spent her whole life shrinking, apologizing, dulling herself down so people wouldn't feel threatened by what she knew. Or worse, what she could do. Now, she found herself standing in front of a group of engineers, architects, students, and environmental scientists, and they were all listening. Not humoring her, listening. Every morning began the same way. Charlotte and Ruby would walk the perimeter of the treehouse trail, checking solar readings, cleaning off panels, monitoring water purity from the spring. They logged the data, now kept journals, not because someone told them to, but because they were running an actual research facility. Every night, they met with the small team that now camped nearby. They reviewed blueprints, debated ethical implementation plans, refined prototype designs. Charlotte had never been to college, never even left the state. But here, in the heart of the redwoods, she was leading something real, something that mattered. One evening, Charlotte was tinkering with the nanocell generator on the lower level when she heard quiet footsteps behind her. It was Lena, the lead engineer from Oregon, who had joined the project just days earlier. "I've got a PhD in sustainable energy," Lena said, crouching beside her. "And I still don't know how you just did that." Charlotte gave a half smile, wiping her hands on her jeans. "I just listened to it. Machines talk. You just have to learn their language." Lena nodded, watching her. "You ever think about teaching this? You've got a mind that doesn't follow rules, you build new ones." Charlotte shrugged. "I never thought anyone would listen." Lena grinned. "They're listening now." And videos started going viral. Photos of the treehouse, dubbed by someone online as the Redwood Revolution, made it into blogs and sustainability forums, then podcasts, then national news. A reporter from San Francisco hiked up the trail with a camera crew. She'd expected a charming woman-in-the-woods story. Instead, she left with footage of a working off-grid lab producing clean energy and water from salvaged parts. The mechanic from Willow Creek. The headline read, "May have just shown us the future of sustainable living." Back in town, everything changed. People who used to mock Charlotte now stopped her at the gas station to ask if they could come see the treehouse. Teachers from the local high school asked if she could come talk to the students, maybe show the girls what was possible. Even Mr. Branson, who once said she couldn't build more than a chicken coop, showed up at the trailhead with a confused look on his face and a pie his wife had made. "I guess I was wrong," he muttered. Charlotte just smiled. A lot of people were But it wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. That fire had burned out. Now, it was about proving something right. That her grandfather had been right to dream so big. That Ruby was right to believe in magic. That maybe Charlotte Reeves was exactly who this world needed. Late one night, Charlotte sat at the very top of the treehouse, the observation dome open to the stars with Ruby curled up next to her, sleeping. The forest was silent except for the hum of stored solar energy and the soft trickle of filtered spring water. She pulled out her journal, the one she'd started the day they found the basement lab, and wrote, Day 21. I used to think the world didn't have room for people like me. Too rough, too loud, too stubborn, too much. Turns out, that's exactly what the world needed. Someone who wouldn't back down when things got hard. Someone who looked at a pile of junk and saw a future. Someone who knew that building something better doesn't take a degree. It takes heart. And I've got that. She closed the journal and kissed Ruby's forehead. Sleep tight, builder girl, she whispered. Tomorrow, we design a new kind of home. The press conference wasn't something Charlotte had planned. In fact, when the environmental nonprofit suggested it, her first instinct was to say no. She wasn't a speaker. She wasn't polished. She didn't even own a blazer. But standing on that makeshift stage beneath the towering redwoods that had once held her grandfather's secret, she didn't feel small anymore. She felt like the roots beneath her boots were holding her up. The field in front of her was full. Reporters, scientists, local townspeople, students, builders, dreamers, and in the front row, right beside a hand-painted Go Mom sign, was Ruby, smiling so wide it hurt to look at. Charlotte stepped up to the mic, took a deep breath, and told the truth. I'm not an inventor, she said. I'm not a CEO. I didn't go to college. I fix things. That's what I do. She paused, adjusting the mic as her voice shook. For years, people laughed at me, told me I was wasting my time, that a woman didn't belong under a hood or behind a workbench. Some people shifted in their seats, some looked down. I used to believe them. She scanned the crowd, then looked up toward the treehouse behind her, its solar panels gleaming in the morning light. But then I found this place, and I realized, maybe they were wrong. Maybe the problem wasn't me. Maybe the problem was the world not being ready for people like us. People like her grandfather. People like Ruby. People who built things from nothing. Charlotte took a deep breath and continued. My grandfather built this treehouse to prove that we don't need billion-dollar corporations to live better. We don't need to pollute our air and poison our water to survive. We don't need to destroy the planet to keep the lights on. She pointed toward the glowing screens on the edge of the platform, displaying real-time energy generation, air quality readings, and water filtration metrics. All of this, every inch, was built using salvaged parts, solar panels, rainwater, and imagination. No oil, no wires from the grid, no waste. A ripple moved through the crowd. This isn't science fiction. It's not a fantasy. It's here, it's working, and we want to share it. Charlotte paused, then leaned slightly closer to the mic. We're releasing everything my grandfather designed. Every blueprint, every test, every failure, every success. Gasps echoed from the press box. Someone shouted. Wait for free. Charlotte nodded. For free. Open source. Public domain. Because this doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told they're not enough. A beat of silence. Then applause. And then, like a wave breaking on the shore, cheers. Not polite clapping. Not a press-friendly golf clap. Real, guttural, joyful noise. Charlotte blinked fast, but not fast enough to stop the tears. Later, as the crowd began to disperse and reporters lined up for interviews, Ruby ran up and grabbed her hand. "You were amazing," she whispered, squeezing tightly. Charlotte knelt down to her level. "You know this was never just mine." "Right, it was always ours." Ruby beamed. "So, what happens now?" Charlotte stood, turned toward the treehouse, and smiled. Now we build more." In the following months, Project Hearth expanded from a concept to a movement. 3 pilot communities were approved in low-income areas across the country, all based on Henry Reeves's original designs. Charlotte was invited to speak at environmental summits, lead design panels, even guest teach at colleges that had once never heard her name. But she still came home every night to the treehouse, to Ruby, to the woods, to the whisper of redwood branches reminding her who she was and why it all began. One evening, months after the press conference, Charlotte stood at the edge of the overlook again. This time, she wasn't alone. A young girl, no more than 12, stood beside her. Her hands were covered in grease, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, her eyes shining. "I heard what you did," the girl said, "and I want to build stuff too. But people say I'm too small, too loud, too weird." Charlotte crouched beside her and smiled. "You know what my granddad used to tell me." The girl shook her head. "The world needs more weird, more loud, more bold. That's where all the good stuff comes from." The girl grinned. And just like that, the next builder was born. What began as a mocked mechanic in a forgotten town turned into the leader of a movement that might just change how we live on this planet. And it didn't happen because she was lucky. It happened because she dared to believe that her hands, the same ones covered in grease and scars, could build something no one else could see. The greatest ideas are often hidden in the hearts of the people no one notices. The girls in the back of class, the single moms with calloused hands, the dreamers with messy notebooks. Charlotte didn't just fix machines. She rebuilt belief in herself, in her family, in what's possible. And if she could do it, so can you. The end. Up next, 2 more real stories of unlikely heroes who changed everything. Click to keep building with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe second chances and bold dreams still matter.